Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I want to talk a bit about a character Final Fantasy XIV players will be getting to meet for the first time soon. As many of you know, the Echoes of Vana'diel Alliance raid series is coming in patch 7.1, and we've had a few teasers thus far. The first one was of this character, the Shadow Lord. I actually released a video several months ago covering important pieces of the Shadow Lord's background and story for anyone interested in learning more about this character. However, in the most recent live letter, we were given the key art for patch 7.1, revealing to us another fan favorite from Final Fantasy XI will be joining the fray, Prishe. This is one of Final Fantasy XI's most popular protagonists, so much so that she was the second Final Fantasy XI character represented in the Dissidia series, appearing in Dissidia Duodecim alongside Shantoto, and again in Dissidia Opera Omnia before the game's end of service. I said that there was no chance they didn't include her in this raid series because of her popularity, and sure enough, here she is. With her making her Final Fantasy XIV debut, I wanted to briefly cover who this character is and what impact she may have on Echoes of Vana'diel's raid story. Keep in mind, for any of you Final Fantasy XI vets, I'm not going to be recalling all of Chains of Promethea. That's a lot, and a lot of events don't necessarily expand on Prishe's character so much as she's just present in a lot of them. Let me just begin this and it'll make more sense. So as a character, Prishe is a rambunctious young Elvan first featured in the game's second expansion, Chains of Promethea. At some point in the past, minimum 20 years ago, realistically probably 25 or 30, Prishe was foretold to have a special destiny. This fortune manifested itself during her baptism, where a powerful relic known as the Eye of Altana caused a powerful force known as the Emptiness to crystallize in her body, creating a small crystalline protrusion on her chest. This event caused her to cease aging and for her to become basically undamageable in battle, granting her sort of immortality. Because of this, she was locked away in the cathedral in Tavnasia, her homeland, and labeled the Abhorrent One, but this would do little to dissuade her from her supposed destiny. She was taken on by Cardinal Mildarian, which is a whole thing. She's actually a character named Eshentarl, who's a member of an ancient race known as the Kulu, who's disguising herself in the current age, but she's a Kulu who became a Xylart, and she's a member of a society of Amerthwin, or however it's pronounced, who's actually trying to stop Promethea from coming back. Like I said, Promethea is a whole thing. All you need to know is that this Mildarian or Eshentarl took her on, gave her an amulet that would guide her thoughts at Mildarian's whims, and protected her from powerful magics that may threaten her in ways that physical damage could not. Mildarian then trained Prishe in the ways of theology that she might better understand the gods of Vana'diel as part of her future goal. This gave Prishe the opportunity to socialize a little bit more. She got to leave the cathedral, and she eventually meets a young Olmia who was suffering from self-doubt after failing to join the Tavnasian choir due to stage fright. This began a lifelong friendship between the two, with Olmia becoming an accomplice to Prishe's reckless schemes, as well as a somewhat reasonable method of trying to reel in the immortal child with a bit of sense. However, the efforts of Prishe's teachings and friendships would be cut short as the orcs descended upon Tavnasia during the Crystal War. This is the war where the Shadow Lord was trying to take over the world. Using a weapon of mass destruction, Tavnasia's armies were wiped out and the remaining citizens were cut off from the mainland. Despite this, Prishe and Mildarian managed to save several of the citizens and establish a small township within the underground of the archipelago. Shortly after, Mildarian disappeared and Prishe was left to tend to the people alongside Olmia and whatever remaining leadership there was. Fortunately, her role as a savior here caused her negative image as the Abhorrent One to largely dissipate, though her headstrong attitude only grew as she accepted her immortality more and more. Throughout Chains of Promethea, Prishe is often proactive, coming up with plans and locating any NPCs who can assist her far ahead of the player themselves. While she doesn't have much tact when approaching people, often butting heads with them, it always works out for her in the end. On some few occasions, she does require the assistance of the player or other characters, usually in dealing with some sort of major threat while she takes care of something else. As the story progresses, she gradually reveals her deeper thoughts about her destiny and her immortality. This comes to a head when she is led to believe she is the Keeper of the Apocalypse, a being designated to be the vessel of the Twilight God Promethea so that he may return to Vana'diel and take his revenge on mankind for their sins. She reveals how little she values her own life, seeing it as inconsequential, and how she would gladly allow herself to die if it meant the opportunity to slay Promethea when he took her as his vessel. While her role as the Keeper is taken from her throughout the story, this attitude would continue in her desire to rush headlong into any life-threatening scenario if it meant her life having some sort of meaning. Prishe is present in all of the most major parts of the Chains of Prometheia story. There are several points where it branches off, and not every character is present. So she's not there for absolutely everything, but all of the most important story beats, she's really there. And she has a direct role in a lot of the confrontations that, places where she can make use of her resistance to battle damage. She confronts Bahamut directly along with his minions and communes with him on multiple occasions in an attempt to forestall the Worm King's advances to eliminate mankind. She is present in the final encounter against Prometheia himself, assisting the player directly in combat. When Prometheia is weakened, she uses a piece of magicite known as the Star of Tavnasia to crystallize the emptiness inside of him, greatly weakening him and allowing the adventurer to eliminate him with the light of the Mother Crystals. After this event, Prishe laments on her eternal life one final time before the magicite in her chest magically vanishes, restoring the emptiness within her and granting her mortality once again. She accepts mortality as a blessing, coming to terms with her emotions before running off, ending out the expansion. Her story doesn't end there, though. She continues to grapple with mortality after the events of the story, and it changes her substantially. She begins acting like she kind of believes a person her age and in her position as a theologian should. She's kind, polite, even a little bit shy. This is short-lived, however, as when faced with a new Keeper of the Apocalypse, Prishe returns to her former attitude and joins the party in taking on the new Keeper. She has Olmia to thank for this, though. Olmia really kind of, gets some sense into her, I suppose. While she actually sustains battle damage now, this doesn't stop her from basically approaching enemies as she would before. She directly tries to protect Olmia by taking on the Shadow Lord 1 versus 1, and just puts her battle prowess to good use however she can. In fact, an image of her appears in the conclusion of Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, the game's swan song story, as her and the other heroines from the various expansions team up to battle the emptiness protruding from one of the Mother Crystals, taking shape as the Cloud of Darkness. Prishe's attitude and fearlessness help propel her popularity amongst the player base, while her proactive ability ensures she's never really helpless or unable to act. In the few times she really needs the help of the player, such as when her mind is trapped in the dream world of Dynamis by Diablos, her consciousness within that realm is still the same behavior as she would normally be. While her outlook on life is definitely a bleak one, she never really lets it stop her, using her immortality as a gift as much as she possibly can until it's taken from her, at which point she gains a sense of fulfillment and purpose in what she had accomplished. So how does that tie into Final Fantasy XIV? How might they utilize her character and the bounds of Heidelin's world? Well, for one, it's worth noting, this is not Final Fantasy XI within 14. They're not like joint worlds here. Yoshida himself said that this is Final Fantasy XIV and these characters and this scenario are going to be worked into the world and lore. It's similar to how Ivalice is in the game, but it's not the Ivalice from Tactics or 12. They're not like inextricably bound now. No, it's just Final Fantasy XIV's take on Ivalice. That being said, Prishe has a lot of character aspects that can be utilized. Her immortality is a big one. Her role as the Keeper of the Apocalypse is very likely to play a major role. And Prishe is actually part of a lot more storylines than she's actively present in. In fact, Chains of Prometheia is kind of the end, sort of a little kind of mini arc that's not ever explicitly stated within the game, but there's enough quests tying them together that you can kind of call it part of the arc of the Xylart and the Kulu. This actually has ties to the game's base story and the first expansion, Rise of the Xylart. The Shadow Lord's creation, which I covered in my Shadow Lord video, is actually caused by the Star of Tavnasia. That relic's actually a piece of her magicite that broke off and poisoned the minds of the Northlands expedition, leading directly to the events that create the Shadow Lord. His resurrection defeat then prompts the Xylart to come out of hiding and attempt to open the gates of paradise, which would destroy all mankind. Prometheia originally cursed mankind for even attempting to reach paradise. So all of these things kind of tied together in a way where Prishe can be given really any sort of agency. They don't have to tackle every little bit of her. I think the most important thing is that she is that kind of headstrong, rambunctious character that people remember her for. If she's the more timid or shy version, it would probably be a little bit strange, unless she starts out that way and then gradually works to being her more confident self. There's room for her character to be different and grow and still kind of hit the same story beats as they did in Chains of Prometheia, and provide something that's not just in line with the Final Fantasy XI players' expectation, but something that the Final Fantasy XIV players will understand why she was such a popular character, why she was chosen for Dissidio Duodecim, though you get a pretty good idea of her character if you've ever played Dissidio Duodecim as well, with how kind of in your face she is. Some of her battle lines are really funny at that too. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I do think that Prometheia, or Altana herself, the goddess from Final Fantasy XI, basically their Heidelin equivalent, are likely to be the final bosses. If Promethea is, that would make sense, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them kind of pull a weird thing where they somehow make it Altana as some sort of alternate Hydaelyn in some sense, like some misguided version of it. It really depends on where the story goes, and there are a lot of ways that it really can go. I think they are going to feature a lot of the most major protagonists from Final Fantasy XI's base story and first 2 expansions. I expect the Shadow Lord. I expect the Archangels, which are basically like ultra versions of the player races that are available. You have the Xylark, Camlanot, and Ealdnark. You could also use Nagmeloda, who's another character from Chains of Promethea, Eshentarl, Promethea. I know some people are thinking Absolute Virtue. I think that ship has sailed. I think the version in BA is as much as we'll ever see of that. But there are a lot of villains throughout Chains of Promethea. I don't think they'll use any of the Bahamut stuff or any of his kin. Maybe they'll use Oryu as a dragon. That's one of Bahamut's minions. You know, there's of course, essentially the Brood is kind of here. There's a Tiamat. There's a Vritra. All of those are basically there. There's a few different ones, and not all exactly the same, but I think they can basically get all the most popular bosses and hit all the most popular story beats without going super in depth to the various things that had to be set up throughout all of Chains of Promethea. There's a reason why I'm not covering the whole thing here, because if we want to go over Movopolos, and we want to go over Altayu, and we want to go over Nagmeloda, and everything with Eshentarl, every single one of them could be their own video. And maybe they will be. Maybe if we start getting story beats that relate to these things, I'll be able to better formulate an idea of what to talk about, what not to talk about. For now, know that it's probably going to be a lot to unpack. Not to mention, and I'm going to talk about this in a separate video, I think they're actually going with a storyline more akin to what we see in the Wings of the Goddess expansion. And that's actually going to tie into why Juno is the first raid in this Alliance raid series, which was actually the main city from the base game, like the main end game hub. So yeah, I'll talk about that in another video either way, but yeah, this should get you at least a little bit more acclimated with Prishe, Promethea, and some of the things you might come to expect from the Alliance raid. Hopefully Prishe will be a fan favorite again, but for now, I think that's enough Final Fantasy XI talk. My PTSD can only make good content for so long. Anyway, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned. I'll be doing more of these Final Fantasy XI, catch-up videos for anyone who doesn't want to suffer the patience to actually play the game itself and get to experience all this, because it is quite the time-consuming experience, even nowadays. It's much less time than it used to be, but it's still a decent amount of time. So I will see all of you in the next video. And until then, take care.